Hi, and welcome to the Stacey Embrers podcast. I'm a recovered alcoholic and sex and love addict and codependent, and I spent most of my life self-abandoning. In this podcast, I will be giving you mindset guidance and sharing the tools I used as well as my personal stories to guide you to return back to yourself. Because if you are searching for yourself, you can just go ahead and call off the search party because you are already right there. So welcome back to the Stacey Embrers podcast, and I have a special guest here, Bre Wolta, relationship clarity coach. And Bre and I met years ago.
So many years. I don't even know how many years.
We were in different lives at the time.
Yeah.
And we've come together and we're doing kind of parallel work, which I think is so beautiful and so special. So tell me about a relationship clarity coach.
Yeah. Well, hello. I'm so happy to be here. Relationship clarity coach is a term that I created because what I do with my clients is help them find clarity around their relationship patterns. So ultimately, we want to help them free themselves from these dysfunctional patterns, the dysfunctional relationships, the unhealthy people they are attracting, and really find themselves again. So there's a lot of seeking and a lot of uncovering that we're doing in that process with the goal of having clarity around who you are, what you want, what you stand for, what relationships you want in your life, which ones you don't, and having the confidence to move forward in the direction to make that a reality.
I mean, that is, looking at our patterns is so important.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's like, and then when one shows up, I'm like, dang it. I thought I already got rid of that one. Why did it come back
again? Yes. Yeah. I named my business Lucid Living with Bre, and the lucid part is important for me because it's that moment of awakening when we think we're asleep. You know, when you're having a lucid dream and you're like, oh my God, I'm like fucking in control of this dream. I think life is so much just falling asleep and waking up, falling asleep and waking up. Like we never get to this point of I'm fully awake. I fully healed all my patterns. I'm fully enlightened, right? It's like, no, we just get better at waking up when we fall asleep because we understand that we're starting to nod off.
And for me, it's like having a shorter window of time where I fall off and then I wake back up. Like that's a shorter period of time that I have been able to do. Not always, but as I become more awake,
Yeah.
I know that you talk a lot about relationships and, really my passion is self-abandonment.
Yeah.
And you have wonderful Instagram videos. And the reason that I was so drawn to you is because a lot of the things that you talk about, I really relate to. And I was like, you see me, you really see me. And there's a lot of self-abandonment in your work as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I'd really love to talk about self-abandonment as we are opening up ourselves to explore inviting love into our life. And, I'll just share a little story for myself and if you want to share, if you relate to it, my whole life, I was falling all over myself. I was falling in love and I was falling, and that word, we just kind of fall all over ourselves. And as I became more awake and as I created this very deepened, awareness of myself, I became almost obsessed with being so discerning and being so intentional with, I don't fall in love with somebody or in like with somebody. I choose to be in a relationship with someone. Because I did it wrong for so long. It was like I would wake up and I'd be like, how did I get here?
Oh, I relate so deeply. Yeah. And in my experience, it was like, if they liked me, I liked them. Oh. It was like, oh, they chose me. So this is it. And I guess I like them, and I'll morph myself into being whatever fits into their world with their friends and their hobbies. And pretend that I love watching football all day on Sundays and getting hammered at the bar. And, just like, because I didn't have any like frame of who I was outside of who I was in a relationship. It's like, I just became them. I became whatever they wanted because they chose me, and that was it.
And that was the one deciding factor, is if you chose me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like so many people, that is like the one criteria.
Yeah.
And I shifted so much to, do I even like you? Do I even want to spend time with you? Do I even want to spend one more minute with you? And how empowering that was. And it took a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
So what steps can people take to create kind of like a checklist for themselves? And, and in terms of, do I even like you? Mm-hmm. Instead of, do you like me? And so how can we start that checklist?
Well, I will use an addiction metaphor for you, because a lot of the way that I teach is from an addiction lens. And we have to get clear on who we are, what we value, what we need, what we like, what we dislike, what our non-negotiables, what our red flags are, all of these things. We have to do that in a sober mind. Mm-hmm. So when you're in the addiction to chaos and the addiction to validation, whatever the feeling is for you, you have to get clear on what you're standing for before you're like fitting other people into that. Mm. Because if you're starting to date and you're trying to make your red flags list, and let's say communication, like you need them to respond to your text messages. That's just a need that you have. And this person is really hot and very charismatic and takes you on these expensive dates, but they ghost you for like days at a time. When you're making your list, you might be like, I don't really need them to communicate. You fit the list to the person instead of having the list and bouncing the person off of it to see if they align. So I highly recommend that when you're doing the introspection around these things, first you have to drop judgment around what your values and your needs and your wants are, because none of those things are inherently better than someone else's. So if I value health and fitness and you don't, it doesn't mean that one person's better. It just means we're not going to align very well, and we're not going to really have a lot of ways to spend time together that are fulfilling for both of us. So gathering data, that's what I do with clients, is we gather data about who they are, just the facts. Like there's no judgment around that. And we work with the resistance that comes up around the judgment around those things. But for so many of my clients, and myself included, like I never did that exercise.
Oh yeah, you're exactly right. It was like, I mean, especially in my 20s, when I was my full on addiction, it was like, I was a huge football fan. Like I'm literally not, and it was like, I would love like metal music or like random, like I would morph into what I thought that person wanted me to be.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so you're saying if we make this checklist, like really understand who we are and what we want beforehand, because it's easy, you're right, to get in and be like, well,
that's not that important.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. The process of being curious about yourself is one that I think deserves a lot of time and space. Because also you don't just sit down one day and make these lists and like, that's it. Like these are ongoing lists where you're adding to your needs. You're like going about your day and you're like, oh, I really like going for walks, or I really like spending time with this person. Right. And you kind of you're just ongoing writing things down so that you can refer back to the person that you are. I know I had to start from like ground level when I was given this exercise for the first time. I was like, okay, I'm making coffee. I like coffee, right? And would write it down, because when I was on a date or when I was with friends and they're like, well, what do you like to do? I was like, I don't know. What do you like to do?
Yeah. Like, I have no idea.
Total blank face, total blank. panic, anxiety. I'm like, I don't know. Just tell me what you like and I'll become that. And that's such a needy energy when you're dating. And even if you do attract the person who like is okay with you morphing into them, eventually that's going to start to feel pretty codependent, and the relationship is not, you're not creating an authentic connection because you're not your authentic self. You're just pretending. You're just putting on their mask. So to have a healthy relationship, you have to know who you are so that you can authentically connect with someone else who knows who they are, and then see if that's gonna work.
Yeah. Well, and then if you pick someone that just loves this about you because you're so flexible and you don't know what they want, and say that they're really controlling. And so that, this is the contract in the relationship.
Yep.
Contract is, I tell you what you like and what you want. And then it's over. You completely lose yourself.
Yeah. And unfortunately, so many women who, and I'm sure men too, but I work mainly with women, so I'll stick to that demographic. When we don't know who we are, we're not setting boundaries around anything because we don't know what to set boundaries around. So we attract the people who will manipulate and take advantage of that. So then you're adding the compounding manipulation and the gaslighting often into that situation. And we start to feel crazy. We're like, who am I? This is all my fault. I'm the toxic one. I hear that from almost every single client that I work with. And I'm like, I can tell you 100% that you are not the narcissist because we are having this conversation. We believe that. They believe because they've been spun around at different degrees, right? Some of us have been with full-on narcissists. Others are just in dysfunctional patterns. But to believe that everything's your fault and that you can fix everything by yourself is not real.
If you have friends who are struggling with feeling stuck in their life, or you have watched their soul's flames start to dim, share this episode with them. It may help them to reignite their fire. Hit the share button, copy the link, and send it over to them. If you haven't already, please follow the Wild Embers podcast by hitting the plus sign on the Apple Podcast or the follow in Spotify. And that just means that each new episode is sent straight to your podcast app rather than you having to go look for it. Thank you so much for joining me today.